Well, welcome to another episode of AW Classroom Podcast, where we have intimate talks with dope artists and visionaries of color doing their thing in the art world. As you may know, I'm Kiara Cristina Ventura, and I'm a curator and owner of Processa, formerly known as Artsy Window. I have recently changed the name of the platform. And today we are focusing on the photography and NFT solo exhibition by Luis Santana at the Mynt Gallery in Chelsea. This is also a live recording on Zoom. So we have listeners listening in live right now. So I want to just thank everyone who's here virtually on the Zoom meeting group right now. To set the foundation of this conversation, I want to give the floor to Molly O'Brien from the Mynt Gallery. So Molly, can you explain a little bit about what the Mynt Gallery is about? And also, if you could do a little explainer about NFTs for those who aren't familiar about them.
Yeah, totally. So the Mynt Gallery is one of the projects that a team of 7 creatives have kind of come together and collaborated on to help build a community in the NFT digital space. We have different pillars like digi-fizzy experiences, metaverse experiences, also education, and now we have this gallery that we've been working on where we've been experimenting with those things amongst others. And this time I'm very excited to be able to welcome Luis into the space and you, Kiara, curating it just to kind of experiment with how photography can be seen in the NFT world. I'm very excited about it because I think it really gives this potential for creatives to have some sort of ownership over their work. Because you can use contracts, and like what we did with this project, we used a smart contract on HiPicNap that divided the ownership into showing that Luis minted the work and then that he had support from the Mynt Gallery and Kiara in it, so that when the work sells, there's royalties that keep paying out to all of us. So it's like we collaborated, we did this team thing, and that's really beautiful. So that's some of the stuff we're trying to work on, showing people right now by having Luis's work in the gallery that's possible with photographs, because up until this point, it really hasn't been there. So yeah, we're just experimenting, and we have a lot of exciting things coming up education-wise and being in the gallery long term. And if anyone has ideas and things, we're also open to that. And that's where we're going to transition hopefully into being a DAO, which is another thing within the NFT space where ownership is within the community and you have patronage and that kind of thing. And you start to vote on stuff. So that's kind of the beauty of this Web3 NFT space. And I could go down so many routes, but I feel just kind of starting there, showing how important the community, the education, and giving opportunities to emerging artists like Luis, and also from diverse communities. And also being in New York, getting to tap into those communities because they're all really beautiful. And both of you guys, you grew up there. So it's really nice to have you come together in this space that's the center of the art world to some extent and see what you can build.
I love how the Mynt Gallery is a space for experimentation, and to see Luis's show in the space is also amazing and very rare for me, just as an avid art person who loves going to gallery shows, seeing a photography show that's also an NFT show is just really unique. So I'm going to give the floor to Luis. So Luis, can you introduce yourself? Something I like to ask people who are on the podcast is how would you just describe yourself as a person? Are you a caretaker? Are you a lover? Are you a giver? Are you a documentarian, right? How would you describe yourself as a person? And then can you just give us a little bit of info around the intention behind As Time Stood Still as an exhibition?
I would define myself as someone who's curious about the world, and that's kind of how my venture within my creative process has always been led, is to explore through the narrative of analog photography. And that's kind of what merged this exhibition As Time Stood Still as some of you may know, it started in Philadelphia this summer as a solo exhibition, which was comprised of work from 2020 and to the present day specifically. But it was more so about channeling trauma that I was experiencing throughout the pandemic, throughout the protests, through losing loved ones, mentors, and friends, where I was able to heal through this process in a creative outlet, where I wasn't self-harming, I wasn't being self-destructive. I felt like I was able to have the ownership within my foundation and my fundamental tools to create something that felt more therapeutic to my process.
Just to kind of give more information about how this is also an NFT show, I want to say, like, even when you invited me in, like, as a co-curator, I was really drawn to the project, not only because, like, I love your work, and you're a great photographer. I have seen you take pictures of my partner, and I was like, oh wow, like he does this. Like this is like top quality stuff. Taking pictures on film, they came out amazing, right? So I'm just drawn to your work, like as someone who's dedicated to art, and as a curator, right? But I also really love how this is an NFT show, and like how there's benefits to the works also being as an NFT, and how it really gives power to the artists in terms of like royalties. So what are some aspects about the works being NFTs that align with you as an artist and photographer, that also made you like pursue this project with the Mynt Gallery?
It was actually Molly who presented this idea with me. We have a close mutual friend between the two of us, and we've kind of have explored each other's photography through that mutual friend. And over time, she brought me into the space and kind of showed me what the LED screens looked like, and kind of expressed this idea that there isn't really tangible exhibitions surrounding around the NFT space, and if they are, they're more so centered towards a virtual reality in that sense. And she was aware of the show that I had prior, and kind of made mention to the idea that this could be a great opportunity to have this presentation and exhibition as something that's more so a certificate of purchase. If someone were to purchase an NFT, that they would then be able to walk away with a physical and tangible piece from that experience, which is a rarity that I wasn't aware of. I'm still new to the NFT space as well, but something that was really attractive to me within this new digital marketplace was that you could have your own agency within your value, your exposure, and pretty much how you apply yourself. And we had this workshop yesterday in the Mynt Gallery, which, when we were talking about how to really maximize that output, it's the same concept as if you were to network in person. You're applying that exactly to a digital marketplace, and so having that your control within how you want to put your work on the forefront. You want to see it in these different spaces that could apply to different cryptocurrencies, that could apply to different blockchains, and there's just like endless possibilities of where you could go, dependent on what you're comfortable with doing and where you want to see your work presented in. And there's specific blockchains that like highlight photographers or digital art. And it's endless within this metaverse that I'm excited to continue to explore, especially as an analog photographer, because there are some ethics and moral topics that like I still want to have things to be that sacred space for myself that I share within my work.
So I have to ask, what mediums do you use in your process? And also, I'm pretty sure the photographers out there want to know what kind of cameras you use in your process.
Yeah. I honestly, so a little background about my background with photography. My dad's a still life photographer. I grew up in a studio space. And coming from that contrived, really technical background of manipulating images to make them something that they aren't at a certain point is the exact opposite of how I approach my process. I'm kind of seeing things more so for what they are. And with that being said, I am not the most technical person when it comes to equipment. I just know that with certain tools, I could yield this type of product at the end of the day. So I am shooting with a Rolleiflex, which is a square format camera. That's something that is compact enough where I could throw in my bag. It takes 120 film. I shoot predominantly black and white. At one point throughout the pandemic, I was developing my own film because I had so much time on my hands. And my partner used to teach a course at ICP on developing film. So she taught me throughout that period, which then I just ran with that entire experience. And then I dabble with just medium format specifically with other cameras. And I am a huge like film connoisseur. So I have too many cameras, but predominantly I use my Rolleiflex. And then as far as like process, I've been dabbling more so with alternative processes and just kind of mixed media work. I've been working on like doing mosaics around frames specifically, and then my cyanotype process as well. That I have a piece in the show that's a cyanotype quilt.
Because you touched on this, I really want to ask. I know that you have been pursuing photography and taking photos for about 13 years now, which is a long amount of time. I want to know, like, what was that first moment like when you, I guess, picked up a camera and you were like, I think I want to do this, like, for real, or take this on, like, professionally. And I think it's also so beautiful that you kind of got these experiences from your father. Can you just take us into, like, that journey?
I was very fortunate to be gifted a camera around 8th grade. And it was more so my father putting this idea of what he does onto me. So as like a young teen who's wanted to rebel and didn't want to follow within his footsteps, I actually didn't pick up the camera until like a year after. And around that time, I was kind of focused within graffiti and urban exploring. And pretty much just, I was a graffiti writer myself at one point where I was then kind of going into these crazy predicaments, these random scenarios, whether it's like on bridges or abandoned buildings, these amazing moments in my life where then I realized that I had this tool to be able to document what I was experiencing. Because I guess for a lot of graffiti writers, most of these stories live through each other. You know, you have to be there in those moments to experience them. Then somehow it becomes this like prolific narrative where at times it could be blown out of context. And for me, it was more so how could I show this to someone rather than explaining it to them. So that was a really huge footstep in the direction of photography, where then that passion grew for me. And at the time, I was like bartending. It's pretty not in a 9th grade, but eventually with this camera, I eventually developed this passion within photography. And as a bartender, I was able to make tips every night, and I saved up to buy like my first digital camera, or like my own camera that I brought and purchased for myself, which is like a Canon 7D that I still have today. So yeah.
I could also, because I know you're like a New York City kid, right? So it's kind of like I could just imagine you with a camera in New York City as well. Like, did that go like influence you to like take street portraits like you still do today?
Yeah. I would say like the root of my work is really derived from street photography. It's about intuition, being really aware, hyper aware almost, and being conscious of your surroundings. And with all those components together, I think it allows you to create a really good image, whatever the case might be, whether it's a landscape photo, whether it's a portrait, whether you're roaming the streets as a street photographer. So yeah, it developed from like urban exploring and like documentarian work with graffiti writers to street photography, and then to like travel photography, and now I'm more so focused within my portrait stage of my life.
Yeah, I think what's amazing about the show As Time Stood Still is that it does focus on the portraits that you've taken and like the different people who are in your life. And I know that some are strangers, some are of your partner, Laura. Some were taken during the George Floyd protest in 2020. It's interesting the range of the type of people that you've taken photos of and that are a part of the show, and like even though it's this variety of people, all the works like are coming together to tell these stories. So my question is like, how do you choose like who to take these photos of? Like whether you're on the street or whether you're doing like these stage portraits, do you get a vision and you're just like, I want to take a photo of this person? Yeah, like how does that work?
Yeah, I would say it's a compilation of decisive moments and just kind of following my intuition. So, as I mentioned, I literally just throw my camera in my bag every single day. You know, that's something that I'm able to pursue as my art. That I have this tool to document what I want at whatever leisure, at whatever capacity. So it's between, you know, finding a good moment where there is good lighting and someone has a really like unique outfit and they stand out and you could like smell the confidence off of them and you want to like be a part of that. That's something that's attractive. And that's something that I'm drawn towards is like seeing someone who has a certain presence about them. And then, you know, with the more contrived, stylized imagery are more components between working on like more like metaphysical moments that I want to highlight more so within people of color and kind of representing them in a different narrative than what we were seeing them specifically throughout the protests throughout 2020 until the like you know forever you know that's kind of more so what my approach has been is like let me make them these superhuman entities that you know that are untouchable so to speak.
Yeah, so like speaking on that journey and the story that you're telling within the exhibition. I know that most of the photos were taken in 2020 and 2021. As we all know, it is still is a time of civil unrest, and we all had to go through a global shift due to the lockdown and the pandemic. What thoughts were you meditating on during this time, and how do the pieces in the show reflect those thoughts and feelings?
Yeah, I, as an artist of color specifically, I felt like I had a responsibility to do something with my my talent, but also what I could be expressing more of. Because I never really differentiated what I did with who I did it with. It was more so a really free and fluid expressiveness of my photography. But it was more so in this moment, I was like, I have a responsibility to highlight. I have a responsibility to partake in. And it was more so meditating on those thoughts of from this experience where I had so much time on my hands and how to fixate on how do I heal through this experience along with the people who I know are also grieving, you know? So yeah, it felt really therapeutic and very honest within the approach. Yeah.
You know, the show's up. It's in Chelsea. People are seeing the work. I guess when you see people in the gallery just like looking at your work in person, which is a great experience, especially in this time that is so focused on the virtual and the digital, right? We're not seeing these photos on Instagram. Like people actually have a chance to see them in person. What do you hope the visitors like walk away with like after seeing these works?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's been such a personal narrative of my own that I feel like I hope people could walk into this space just with an open mind and to not really have any pre-notions about what to expect, but also just allow themselves to understand and to hear what the story and narrative might be. Because it could go in so many different directions, but it's all a part of my reflection of myself at the end of the day. So it's honestly been a really emotional process being in that space and seeing all this work collectively in one place because it kind of highlights all these very like poignant moments in my life where I was able to heal step by step almost. So yeah, I just hope people can walk into that space without any preconceived notions on what to expect or who I am, but just taking the work for what it is.
And then, I I like to ask this to everyone that is on the podcast because I feel like my intention with this podcast is also to influence other artists who are making or people who want to be artists and really pursue this, especially if they're of color or they come from an underrepresented community in the art world. So my question is, what advice would you give to other artists or other photographers or even someone who's young and is thinking about pursuing photography, but they don't know if they could do it or they don't have the confidence just yet. Like, what would you tell those creatives?
Yeah, not everyone's in New York within that creative scope, but I would say for those who are in New York, there are so many resources, so many places where you can connect with other creators, whether it's like fellowship programs. I know BDC offers a lot of them, to taking on your own courses throughout any other schools or college programs, to also just networking and putting yourself at the forefront in these spaces that you want to be a part of at the end of the day. It is a real, like, it's a crazy pursuit to continue to believe in yourself and to think that like what you're doing is for a reason, and it may not have that whole totality of it a focus, but I think as an artist you're doing something for your own reason at the end of the day, and no one's like, or maybe there are certain grants that can help you apply to do your artistry, but at the end of the day I think it's really important that you are focused on what your initiative is and what your focus is, and have a real foundation of what you're doing and why you're doing it. I think developing a better sense of self, taking time to understand what you're doing within that process and why you're doing it. I think if you could do it as honestly as possible and as purely as possible, the work will translate very connectively with the audience. And if it doesn't, that's fine. But I think it takes that development to tapping into what that audience looks like as well. So I would say, yeah, just continue to do a lot of research. Um, there's a tons of online programs, tons of courses, institutions, fellowship programs that are all out there that are at our disposal, grant applications. I would say just continue to try. And it's at times really difficult to continue to do so. But at the end of the day, it's like, for myself, I do other jobs outside of my creative scope just so I could fund my personal artwork at the end of the day. And that's my passion, and that's like my career path. But I'm just going to continue to try to believe and do what I feel is right.
Yes. Like the Solange song says, do nothing without intention. So, last question. So, speaking of intention, I have to ask, what are you working towards right now, just in general, like with your life? And what intentions are you setting for yourself and your work?
Yeah, that's an amazing question, especially after the retrogrades. I feel like I don't know. This is over the course of the past couple of years, I just have identified myself more as an artist that I want to continue to become. And I think it's more so about like focusing and highlighting on what that looks like and really presenting that time and effort as like a main priority and focus. That's kind of like my transitioning right now in this period is like, what does this look like for me? And yes, this is an amazing experience with the Mynt Lab and doing this gallery. But this is, when this does conclude, there is still so much more to do. And like, that's kind of my focus is like, what else am I going to do? And so, yeah, I think my intentions are focused just with creating really timeless artwork that stands on its own and kind of could only be defined on its own and kind of represents itself as something that's community driven and also thought provoking. And that just feels good conceptually, that is striking and like makes you think and makes you want to create, and leaving those experiences feeling inspired. I would say like those are my true intentions. And along with those intentions, it's really about finding a balance between life and work and art, and trying to understand how I could prioritize each and every single one of those things to be sustainable to do all that I want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, as someone who has been looking at your work, I think you're already accomplishing that sense of like timelessness to your photos. I feel like we talked about this before of just like I feel like there's like an ancient feel to some of the works of like even the one of like Kevin Vasquez behind
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
That's also in the show of like, was this taken in the 50s? Was this taken centuries ago, or was it taken in 2020 or 2021?
Yeah.
I think that's the beautiful thing about your work is that it kind of like erases time.
Mm.
Um, And
Thank you.
yeah, I think it makes people kind of feel more present within that. All right, I think this is a beautiful note to end on. I want to ask you, Luis and Molly, are there any links we should follow? Where can people follow you guys at? People can still see the show. Put all the plugins now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll start off. The show is up until February 16th of 2022, officially at the Mynt Lab, 507 West 27th Street. And then you could go to my website, Luis, Luis dash Santana, Santana.com, and you could find the catalog to the show under the title As Time Stood Still. And you could follow my Instagram, which is also my name, Luis Santana, and there is 4 A's at the end of that. And I just created a Twitter, which I'm going to be more active on within this NFT space, which is also my name, Luis Santana, with 5 A's at the end.
And for us, there's the Mynt Lab, MYNT LAB on Twitter and Instagram, and that links over to Discord as well. And then we also have Crypto Flowers with a Z, which we are launching as of today. I have been told we finally got through our generative. Yeah, so follow us on Crypto Flowers in the Mynt Lab. And then personally, I'm at M0Photo on Instagram.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Beautiful energy that you contributed to this episode. I think it's going to reach a lot of people and do great things and hopefully cultivate some ideas for them. And thank you again. Bye. See y'all next time.